How do we avoid falling into Emperor Constantine's trap of putting the cross on our shields and marching out to some political war and then calling that the mission or God's expanding kingdom?
My first thought is that we have to have a clear distinction in our imagination between the mission of God and our concepts of what kingdoms look like in the world. I think one of the most striking elements of Jesus in the Jesus story is that Jesus is proclaimed king on the cross. And the only time that Jesus sort of endorses that name is when he's on the cross. Every other time, Jesus kind of moves away. The people want to make him king, and he retreats out into the wilderness. Or the people want to rise up against the people who are mad at him, and he'll disappear through the crowd and slip out the other side. The only time Jesus sort of endorses or claims that name for himself is when he's being crucified. And I think part of when we say things like Jesus is king or Christ is king, what we are saying is that Christ is king at his lowest moment, when he is giving himself away for the people around him. When we try to reimagine Jesus as one day he'll come back as the kind of king we always wanted, not like the loser king that he was on the cross, then we've totally missed the whole point, because Jesus is subverting that language when he's using it. Even when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of God, that's a subversive language. It's saying, my imagination of the future, the God's imagination of what could be, is different than your imagination of a king and a kingdom. And it doesn't come by force, and it doesn't come by pushing itself on people or coercing people. It comes by giving yourself away. And so as soon as we begin to imagine a Jesus in the future who will come back the way that we always wanted him to, we've lost the plot. And that's when we're falling into the trap of thinking that we can follow Jesus by pushing for something that Jesus never wanted. So when we talk about mission, when we talk about kingdom, we have to keep in mind that subversive element, that this is not what we expected. This is not what we wanted. This is a humble, service-filled, giving yourself away in order to reframe an imagination about the world. And as long as we keep that in mind, then we can use that language, and we should use that language. But we should never take for granted that when we say these words, Christ is king, when we talk about the kingdom of God, we are, by definition, subverting our own imagination of what those words have always meant to us. That's what it means to follow Jesus. And as long as we do that, as long as we remind ourselves of that, we're much less in danger of falling into the trap of Constantine, much less in danger of falling into the trap of actually undermining the gracious work of Jesus that he accomplished in the world and invites us into. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this language of subversion. I can maybe just say for myself, one of the ways that I know I have been able to sort of keep a level head and then maybe find a different way forward than to just simply go along with the pursuit of power as mission, or the pursuit of my own success as mission, is to think about Christian history and to look for examples where Christians did this. And just a couple of these came to mind as I was sort of thinking about Jared's language there. Is what's interesting is Constantine, this is the 4th century, right, where he sort of has this dream, this vision. It's a crazy story. What's interesting is that's 300 years into the life of the church. And there are some sources. There is some conflict in our understanding of what's going on historically, but we do know that some of the earliest followers of Jesus refused military service. And we know that some of the early sort of communities had this sort of tense relationship between maybe they would help those who were involved in military service, but they felt it wasn't appropriate for them to be involved. And what we know is that within about 300 years, some people had sort of started to move towards, well, maybe we can adopt these positions. But I think it's so important to know that there's never been a better way to say it, there's always been a faction within the community of Christ around the world that has always felt deeply troubled by the relationship to power. And I think two of our Mennonite siblings, I talked about our Catholic, our Orthodox friends, and those who might join our language at Commons, to take the language of our Mennonite siblings who have always felt I don't know what their perspective on mission would be, but my guess is that it would be disconnected from state or political power on almost all cases. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head, but I just want you to know that's for me. One of the ways I try to sort of answer this question is I want to look for those who are part of my tradition who offer me a model for how to sort of avoid the pitfalls that are so common.
Yeah, we'll take one more, but Origen's language in the 2nd century is that in disarming Peter, Christ has disarmed all Christians. And this is, essentially the narrative for the first few hundred years of the church. I would say, in using the language of kingdom and in claiming the title of king on the cross, Christ has also disarmed our imaginations of what kingdom is about, that it is about service, it is about giving your life away. Let's grab one more. We got a question, a comment?
Do we emphasize worship too much then? This is asked in light of Jeremy's response to the first question.
Well, it depends on what we mean by worship, right? Because certainly, in sort of common parlance, by worship we mean singing. We mean getting together, singing songs, having a band on stage, projecting some lyrics on the screen. I don't know that we do too much of that, but I do think if we shift the heart of our Christian life toward what we do when we gather on a Sunday and away from the ways that we serve in our communities and our neighborhoods, then absolutely we've shifted the priorities in the wrong way. If the gathering together and the singing creates that emotional resonance within you that then motivates you on Monday morning to be a more kind and more generous and more gracious person, then maybe we need to do more of the first because it helps us do the latter. So I think the real question is not which takes up more time or who's doing enough of what. It's what is it creating within us? What's it manufacturing in terms of the discipleship and the disciples that we're becoming? But ultimately, I think what Scott is talking about tonight is all of our Christian faith, whether it's, because I think you could say we do too much study, we do too much Bible study, we do too much, like whatever it is that we're doing and we're calling Christian, if it's not resulting in more kind, more generous, more civic-minded people who are looking out for the neighbor, then we're doing too much of it. Whatever it is that creates more of that in you, you should do more of that. And for some of us, that might be different. Like, I love study, I love theology. But if I ever get to a point in my life where that is not making me a kinder person, and it's making me more in my head and less in my relationships, then I need to set some of that aside. And I need to find ways to serve again. So I think that's the litmus test for all of us. And I think it's probably going to be different for each. But I think it is an important question for all of us to say, like, what is my Christianity creating within me right now? Mm-hmm. And is it helping me be the kind of person I want to become? If it's not, then dump some of it and find something new to fill it with.